Something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. So hold on, let me just. So what? All right, I'm actually really curious because obviously we just talked about black, and then Tolkien in chat has his own takes on black. What is black to you?
To me or to Paolo?
To yeah. No, not
Oh,
you.
you go first. I'm thinking.
Or okay, yeah.
Oh,
Both.
that's not fair. Okay, no thinking in my definition then.
Okay.
Black is somewhere between, like, I guess if we're not talking about like necessarily the flavor of the color. We have to talk about how like it plays out in draft specifically, I guess, right?
Yeah, draft
about,
or yeah, deck build, like in general, like what its identity
sure.
typically surrounds.
I guess not. It's not. Yeah, if we're not talking about speed, then black is something that has like trade-offs, conditions, sacrifice, and isn't necessarily aggressive or yeah. I'm not going to refer to speed. I guess it's just trade-offs, conditions, sacrifice. I'm trying to think of some champions that might come under black. Let me look at the LoL champions list, because if I can use a champion to try and like put my ideas into perspective, that might be better.
Would you say like any sort of feeding strategy is black? Like when the junglers took all the farm, or when there's a Senna bot lane that doesn't farm, would these be black strategies?
I mean, that's the idea of a black strategy. Yeah, I've got a great champion.
I think Senna's black in general.
I would say that Lucian is black in general also.
Yep. Lucian to me is black-red. Because he must win lane. He has some flexibility, right? But it comes at a cost. There's obvious downsides to his flexibility. If he doesn't get ahead, then he's going to suffer a lot. Very, very akin to Draven. Him and Draven are from the same school of thought. There's lots of videos or like discussions that I've had on stream with like pro players where if you're willing to pick Lucian, I feel like 9 times out of 10 it should just be Draven, because they come from the same school of thought and they're trying to achieve the same thing. And Lucian, the spots where Lucian's going to be more ideal is going to be very, very thin comparatively to like Draven.
Are you talking about the ADC Lucian or all Lucians?
The ADC Lucian.
Okay.
Or even mid Lucian, I guess. Because, yeah, Lucian can be flexed 3 roles. He can be flexed mid, top, and AD.
And what would you say, Paolo? What's your idea?
Makes sense to me. I was originally trying to think about all of the colors in terms of the speed the game is played, because to put it on the same axis. But this does make sense to me, that you have like trade-offs, conditions, things that you have to be mad, and then if they work, you're super good. If they don't work, you're super bad. So like ranging from this champion needs a kill early, or this champion needs your team to support. Like, is Yasuo a black champion because you would need knockups, but you don't really need them? But it's better if you have other knockups. Would that classify? I don't really know, but yeah, I think this definition is good.
I think when I think of Yasuo, I don't. Yasuo is one I've actually struggled over when people have asked me about him. So it's actually so sick that you bring him up, because yeah, like you're pointing out, he can give himself his own knockups. He can give himself his own alley-oop. So like Yasuo is really scary with certain item spikes. Right? Like the way that he interacts with crit, the way that he ramps himself also, because some of his recipe buys are oppressive. Yasuo is one of the scariest recipe buy champions in the game. Another one that's really scary with recipe buys, I would say, is like Vladimir. Vladimir is really good with recipe buys. And when I'm referring to recipe buys, I mean the non-completed items. Yasuo gets so much raw brute force power out of recipe items, but then they become like this giant monster once they're completed. And it almost feels like he's never out of the game. So when I think of Yasuo, I think of like green-red with black. Because when I think of green-black, I think of something that can just come over the top if the conditions for it are all met, and it has like late game insurance, late game wake up, and everything.
So what do you think about Yasuo makes him red? Sorry, I was expecting you to say blue.
Oh, green
but-
white is also in a yeah. Go ahead. What?
Why do you what about Yasuo makes you think red? Because I was fully expecting you to say blue, because like I don't think are there lanes where Yasuo is like Yasuo's never really a good lane pick, right? Are there,
No, there's some lanes that he actually bullies encounters.
but
you
like
you might
like
actually
Kassadin, I guess, but like not that. He's not picked as a lane champion, right? That's not why he's drafted, really. Right?
No, he's generally not drafted just in isolation of his own lane.
Yeah, I would expect like
Yasuo
Yasuo to be more of a blue champion, because he's playing to the late game and to the late game team fight, right? That's why
Yasuo is
getting
really
there.
weird though, because he can be flex 3 roles. He can actually invalidate certain team compositions. He can play defensive and offense. Like Twitch chat is sort of memeing right now that Yasuo is rainbow, but I actually wonder if he actually is. Because he sort of does everything. He obviously does some things better than others, but
Sounds like he should be picked more.
he should be, or he could be picked a lot more than he has credit for. Yes, he could be picked a lot more than he has credit for.
We just broke the meta, confirmed.
So what would you say is the opposite of a black champion then? Would this be like a low economy champion, for example? A champion that whatever happens, it's fine, you just use your ultimate and then that's enough in the fight?
So interestingly enough, and I'm not like trying to meme like yin and yang, this is like when I think of white, I think of like it has lots of different things. It's sort of like a jack of all trades color. Because I think that if you go into like what white's identity is, it has like removal, it has pacifism, it has things that lock you down. It also has like very efficient costs. It's able to do many things. It can also overwhelm you. It can play many sides of a coin.
Would you say that? Going back to black? Sorry.
Yeah.
Would you say that like the idea of champs that have split pushing as part of their kit is that part of a black strategy, or does that fit into like the identity of black? Trend isn't really picked in competitive. I'm trying to think of a champ that split pushes regularly.
I think if the champ can only win via split push, yeah, I think that would be a black. Like Tryndamere, I think is a really good example. It's not to say that he can't team fight, but I think he clearly excels by going around the opponent and doing stuff that's very dirty. But it comes obviously at a cost. Because your team has to be sculpted to play with that. They have to be able to play the 4v5. They have to be able to juggle the aggro from the opponent in order to offer Tryndamere what he's trying to do.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But to reiterate about white, like I think of when I think of white champions in League of Legends, I think of champions that they can fit into many different areas, and they might even have alternate modes, or like you were saying, like low economy. I think generally they're really well rounded, but they don't necessarily excel at anything better than dedicated themes. But they have clear identity in their well-roundedness. I'm trying to think like how I can elaborate on this more. Like I think of Gragas as a white champion. Because Gragas can gank. He can be oppressive. He can be active. He can do stuff early. He's very valuable mid game. He has late game. If you want him to, can play low econ. He can invalidate certain things. Like he's very good at many things without very clear trade-offs, or like the trade-offs are virtually negligible.
I guess it's when specifically for junglers, it's quite hard to define too many junglers as blue. Like
yeah,
most of the play,
Sejuani.
Yeah, Sejuani, like Karthus.
Yes.
But like most of the junglers play towards early game because that's what most metas have asked of them. right? But I guess you have to define jungle as relative of
Yeah,
SC.
Kindred's another white one.
Sure.
Protection. You know, like champions that are protective of things, you know? Like where defensiveness or like counter defense, like not counter in the sense of blue, but like counter in the sense of like I'm a wall. You know what I mean?
So would you
like,
say that like Tahm Kench fits into that white?
Yeah, Tahm Kench is white. Yeah. I think
It's interesting. Because in Magic, I agree with what you said, that white can do anything. But in my mind, the white cards are inflexible. Like, sorry, white as a color is flexible because it has the tools to do anything.
Yes.
But the white cards themselves are binary. It's either a 1-mana creature or a destroy all creature card. Right?
Yes,
so it's unlike.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's unlike the blue cards. Like the blue cards, the same card can be played aggressively or controlish depending on the game state.
Yes.
Right, depending on what's happening. But the white cards cannot. Like if you put the white cards in your deck, they have to go with the other aggressive white cards. You can't just mix and match different types of white cards, even though they're the same color, because they are different strategies.
Yes.
So I don't know how I would translate that into League of Legends.
So, okay, so for Gragas, right? Gragas can play low econ and not have to deal a lot of damage. He can just be utility, right? If you need him to do that. So in the draft phase, you might slot him in to be that way. Like you might have other sources of magic damage, which makes it inefficient for Gragas to be, you know, double penetration items into AP, like Glass Cannon. Even though he can do that, he might not slot in that way. I think inside of the draft phase, the white champions, their theme will become binary at the conclusion of the draft. And then almost irregardless of what they could do, they will only abide by that once the game itself actually starts. Does that make sense?
Yes. So you can choose. It's like a king, for example. You choose one, and once you chose, you're stuck with that.
Yes, that's white. Yes, Mally. Yes. Like Jarvan. Jarvan can do many things, but when you select it, he's only going to do that one. Generally, like how you position him in the draft, he's only going to do that thing. Gragas, same damn way. He's only going to do that thing. Gangplank, same thing in the draft. He's only going to do that thing, depending on what you're trying to pick him for.
Okay, like that makes sense to me.
Like if you pick him in some drafts, he's there for late game scaling, and then sometimes like against it's Aatrox, right? Then he's going to be a lane bully.
Yes.
Okay, sure.
Great. We are making fucking progress. Is all this still interesting to you? I don't know how like this is really fun for me. I don't know about how you are.
I'm living it. I don't know about the other people. But...
Okay.
As a member of chat, my 3-head brain is right on the edge of exploding, but I think we're just about holding on.
Okay, hold on. So what would you? All right, so let's define white. Jack of all trades, master of none, or like, how would we? Jack of all trades, master of one. Would that be a better way of saying it? Like it can do many things, but when you select it, it's only gonna do one. Does that make sense? Is that an apt way of phrasing it?
I think so. Maybe throw the word binary in there somewhere, because I think that's...
Yeah. Binary, jack of all trades, master of one.
Yeah, I think writing out more of what you've just said is a better...
Yeah. So, okay. Whatchamacallit? Capable of many things, but
can do many different things, but only one at a time.
Yeah,
right. If you try to do both at once, neither is going to work. Even though we could do both at separate times.
Yes. No. Twitch chat. I know the quote is Jack of all trades, master of none, but in regards to how white slots in League, it's Jack of all trades, master of one. That's generally how like white would slot into League. Yeah. Binary. Versatile, binary, Jack of all trades, master of one, can do many different things, but only one at a time. locks itself into its mode theme, often at the conclusion of draft. And obviously things can happen inside of a game that would maybe allow it to, you know, maybe take a turn because of it's so far ahead or something. Just like in a card game. Maybe you get away with stuff that's not traditional. I think that would be I think that would be apt. Yeah. Is there anything else that I'm missing on this one? Protective. White champions generally are protective, in nature, I think. Or like defensive.
Well, the thing is that they can be either, right?
Yeah.
Like the AP Gragas isn't really protective, right? Or is it?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess he's not really protective. Would you say he's an enabler? That sort of goes into like what green. I think of white.
I don't know because it's two different axes too, right?
Yeah, that's where it yeah, I think
how it finds its role.
Right. I think that we've defined it with the versatility binary thing, like locks itself in at the conclusion of draft. I think that's really important to specify, because generally most white champions are gonna be like that, unless like they're propped up by other themes that are present within their kit. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna get a drink really quick. You guys can talk. I'm gonna take like 2 minutes. Is that okay?
Oh sure.
Okay. All right. I'll be right back.
All right, Paolo. Let's talk about LoL. When
Okay.
I'm gonna interview Paolo because that's when did you start playing League of Legends?
So the first time I saw it, I think it was season 2. I went to a Magic event in a convention, and there was a League of Legends event on the screen that was happening there. I think it was the NA LCS finals. And then I looked at it. I couldn't understand anything that was happening, obviously, but there were so many people. And then I found out that my friends played, and I started playing with them, and just for fun. You know, it was. I got more serious about it in before season 3.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
When you play the game, do you approach it in like, do you bring the same mindset of like, I don't know exactly enough to speak to your mindset when it comes to Magic or League, but do you bring the same mindset of like, I want to win and do everything in my power to improve and win as much as possible?
No, because I think that would just be setting me up for disappointment, because I know I will never be a great League of Legends player. So it's more like I want to be the best that I can be, which I know is not necessarily one of the best players.
Okay, sure. Okay, that's making a lot of sense to me. Whereas I when I sit down necessarily to do anything, I want to be the best I can be, and maybe not like you're saying. You know you're never going to be a great League of Legends player, whereas as I want to be the best I can be. You know, if that's the best or not, I'm not particularly bothered.
I mean, I like getting better, but also it doesn't bother me that I'm not one of the best. You know.
Yeah, that's also that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you. Glad to be back. Now my chat's gonna meme me because I don't have my lenses in and I'm like legally blind in my right eye, so it's hard to read chat. Which is also why I didn't notice that like you were here, or I didn't notice other people are here. Which is actually why I have to like VIP people immediately, because otherwise I don't know where to look. So now they're gonna make the text really small, so I can't. This is it's one of the things, you know.
I think they're talking about Morello.
Yeah. Bastards. All right.
What's the magic analogy of Morellonomicon?
Morellonomicon.
Would it be life gain?
You know,
Well, life gain as in something that looks really good, but in fact doesn't do anything.
yes, yes, that would be it.
I just say things and wait for Paolo to explain them and make me look smart.
Yes.
That's my strategy.
Okay. So MTG quadrant theory, developing. You guys are both familiar with this, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about this because I think that people don't look at this when evaluating like a champion in LoL, or like where a champion slots in. So, do either of you want to like briefly explain it for chat?
Sure. I'll give a brief explanation. I'm not sure it'll be the most eloquent. Feel free to chip in, Paolo.
Okay.
The quadrant theory is basically the idea of you evaluate cards through their role at 4 different jobs when it comes to Magic. You can see them written out: developing, parity, and ahead or behind. The idea that those essentially describe the 4 states of what a game looks like. I'm not going to start trying to transfer this to League of Legends. I'll just start with a Magic explanation. Developing was in the first few stages of the game while you're developing your resources and your lands and your early cards. Parity is when both players have reasonably the same amount of resources, and this is mostly for limited, not for constructed, which would be for draft, not for constructed deck. But it still applies somewhat to constructed Magic. But it's mostly for limited, where the roles of aggro and control aren't necessarily as defined by the decks that people are playing, and that aspect probably applies more to League of Legends. So you have developing, which is the early stage of the game where both players are setting up their resources, playing out into a board that doesn't necessarily have much going on, and how will that interact with the other plays that your opponent's going to make at that point. Parity is when both players have a reasonable amount of resources or equal amount of resources, and whether a card is good at breaking that stall or is good at gaining your resources without being ahead. Ahead is how good is a card at closing the game and turning what is a material or resource advantage into actually a 1 game. And behind is if you are in that state of being behind on board or being behind on resources, is a card good? Because if a card's only good when you're ahead, then usually that's not going to be the most powerful card, because you need cards that are flexible and help you in 2 or 3 of these spots. So that would be my basic explanation of the quadrant theory. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think to me it's kind of weird. I actually don't think in terms of the quadrant theory, because I don't think developing belongs in the same classification as the other 3 things. Right? I think in terms of there's 2 different categories. One is am I winning? Am I losing? Or is no one winning? And that would be parity, ahead, and behind.
Yeah.
And then there is another category that is it early game, mid game, or late game? Like, and the early game would be developing. Because right now I think you can be developing and ahead, or developing and behind, or developing in at parity. So to me, it doesn't make that much sense to think in terms of like it's a quadrant,
right?
Because it's completely different from the others, right? It's like saying, oh, you can be a parity and also blue, or in Magic you can be a blue deck at parity, or a red deck at parity. There's things that you can classify, but they don't belong in the same category.
Yes, and
I don't fully understand it.
So the reason that I wanted to bring it up is because this is what when I was talking about like doing this stream, a lot of people brought up MTG quadrant theory, and like, is this something that's used to like evaluate champions? And what I wanted to use it for was mostly I wanted to use the term developing as defining early game, early mid transition, mid late transition, late, and then late to end game. End game being like 40 to 50 minute mark or something, is what I classify end game as. And I wanted to basically bridge or pair all of these meanings and what it could mean for certain champions at those breakpoints. Sort of like what I do in LCK casts. You know, like sometimes I talk about things like as the early to early mid transition or mid to late transition, or even during lull states, and what it means for certain team compositions and champions and whatnot. And I try to better define that. So I basically wanted to take this one, which is developing, and then break it off and use it as a stepping stone to describe game states relative to the other three.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I wanted to talk about. So generally, if you remember at the very beginning of the stream, we talked about red theme team compositions in League of Legends, and I'm a pretty big believer that like full on red theme with no insurance it ought to be very weak in League, because the way that it's drafted is face up, because there's no conceal, or everything is open. There's nothing concealed in draft phase, and you're playing against 5 other professional players that are aware of what you need to try to do. So there's always going to be the arms race. And when it comes to that, I think that a lot of team compositions, they can be evaluated by these 3 parts, right? Parity, behind, and ahead. And even sometimes red team compositions can actually be ahead, in terms of dragons or turrets, or they can be ahead in gold, but they're not actually ahead. And they can even actually be at parity, which is in the LCK, the lull state, right? Or they've started using that term on other broadcasts as well, as like the ping pong state that occurs in pro play and pro games. And then I think that people have a very false misconception on what behind is for certain team compositions, because sometimes this one gets more away from TCGs, but more into RTSs. What? Parity? What? That behind can actually be more favorable than even, and I think that that's weird to some people. And what I mean by that is, I'll pull up a Summoner's Rift map really quick. So I don't know if you can see the stream, but basically,
Yeah, I got it up. Yeah.
Okay. Basically, there's gonna be points in the game. So I call this a triangle. And this triangle on blue side is really hard for the red team to penetrate. Not red like the team composition or color, but the actual red team. And the reason that I say this is because this is very favorable to scaling team compositions. And this is a position on the map that is really hard to break, because this is easily defendable with limited amounts of wards. And the only passages where the opponents can actually fight you are very manageable by the blue team, if they try to go for like an end stage Baron dance. And because of the proximity to Baron with your blue side jungle, this ends up being pretty favorable. So even if you're behind on the map in terms of gold, like you've lost this turret, and maybe you've even lost this turret, so we could just draw like this line, which I guess isn't totally a triangle anymore, but it's going to be pretty rare for the opponents to like be able to push up reliably like to this point. Because of the proximity to Baron, and Baron is the 20+ minute objective that occurs at this location of the map, being behind isn't really being behind, because you have to invest less resources on the map due to the nature of how much surface area you have to cover. And because so many parts of the map are almost wholly irrelevant, like all of this is irrelevant to an end stage Baron dance, in most cases. And this functions in a way that is actually advantageous for the blue team. So even if they're behind in turrets, or they're behind in gold, they're in a more favorable map state than if minions kept going up into the waves, and they were then forced to actually either contest vision that is relevant relative to the minions, and the like how far up they go and whatnot, maybe if the turrets were still alive, or if the map was still more open, and that there was still something that could deny them from getting into this defensive position. Does that make sense?
Like I understand what you're saying, is that it's it's not always clear who's ahead. It's clear who's ahead in terms of gold. You can just look at the numbers, but it's not clear who's ahead in terms of like actually win percentage from a certain spot.
Yes.
Like just because you're down 2 turrets and like 2 dragons, if you still have, if you can't die and you have scaling, then you can actually be like massively advantageous to be in that specific position because all you're doing is farming gold, and your opponents just don't have any way to punish you. But I think it's not super useful to apply the quadrant theory to Magic from Magic. Because I don't think it's like necessarily a great way to look at Magic, and B, I don't know how much crossover it has. But I guess it makes some sense in terms of looking at like how your game. You have to look at how your game plan develops, and kind of what kind of game states you're aiming for. Like you described, like the game state where there isn't like you're looking if you're playing towards a LoL state, like actively playing towards a LoL state.
Yes.
But I don't think the quadrant theory necessarily actively like helps in trying to look at LoL. I think it's kind of it's a reasonable way to evaluate Magic cards, but I think for the crossover here, this one doesn't necessarily make too much sense.
Actually,
like you can, I guess you can argue you can see that like some champs are really bad when behind, and some champs make sense when ahead. That's a different way to define champions.
yes. Basically,
evaluate champions.
So
but it doesn't cross over with the color pie. I guess it would be a completely different analysis.
yeah. And I'm bringing it up for mostly people that asked about it and talked about it in general. And I wanted to bring it up to like sort of like emphasize like, okay, what happens if Lee Sin is even in a game? Like, let's say that a game state is even. What does that mean for Lee Sin? Because a game state can be even between 2 teams, but that might actually mean that Lee Sin's losing, which is then specific to a champion.
I have a thing in solo queue with my friends that I call the Lee Sin coefficient.
Okay.
With every kill a Lee Sin gets, your win rate. With every kill a Lee Sin steals, your win rate plummets by 15%, essentially, until it's the 40-minute mark and you no longer can win. So that's basically what Lee Sin. That's what Lee Sin in draft does.
Yeah, and I think evaluating certain team compositions, like you might have heard me talk in like LCK. Sometimes I'll say that certain team compositions are monstrous at like 3 and 4 items, but then there's a chance for the enemy team comp to eventually bring it back at like 5 or 6, based on like what items they're likely to purchase and what that's going to mean at those breakpoints. And then I think evaluating like game states in that moment is really interesting, and I think that's valuable, and I think that can be broiled down to like champion problems, or not champion problems, but just the way that they exist within their own team composition.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think, and Paolo, do you agree that I don't think the crossover here is massively useful? Looking at your draft through the lens of like development, and trying to understand where you want to be in terms of like and how you deal with parity in your comp, I guess is reasonable, but it's not a great way to evaluate the champion specifically.
No,
like someone said, it's important to see how you play from ahead and behind, because once you understand that your champs play well from either parity or ahead, you don't need to draft like a 5th scaling champion. Well, you don't need to draft a 5th scaling champion when you're already like outscaling in 4 roles.
Twitch chat's freaking out. I'm not ignoring anyone. I'm not really looking at Twitch chat, guys. Do you guys want to do you want to bring in Tolkien to the call?
Fuck it. Let's get us all in there.
All right. Are you fine with that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
He said he was only coming in for a little bit, right? Because once we have so many people, it becomes a talk show.
That's why. Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Oh, apparently we're not friends on. Wait, what? Okay. Apparently we're not friends on Discord.
It's bad.
Okay. How do we message each other? It says I can't add him to the call. This is really weird. Okay. It says I can't add him to the call. I'm not even memeing. Am I? Oh no. Okay. I'm the host,
Is there a
right?
limit?
No, this is so weird.
Can we get Sanchovies in here as well?
No. Oh, I think I
Oh,
got
here
it.
he
I think I got it. I think I got it. Yeah.
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
Hi.
So yeah, I kind of lost track of where you guys were at, but I'm only jumping in for a few minutes.
Okay.
So
Sure.
I'm not ignoring you. I'm not looking at chat.
right, it's already midnight here, so I'm gonna go to sleep soon anyways.
Okay.
So yeah, one of the points I wanted to talk about, it's going back to the colors.
Mhm.
But I feel like PV was very right in insisting on white being all about specifically strong cards, in specific situations, like hate cards, Rest in Peace or Wrath of God. It's only good in a specific situation. And I feel like this fits really well champions that are strong as counterpicks in League of Legends. And black in Magic is an enemy color to white. And in Magic is usually defined by being able to have access to a lot more tools than other colors, but by sacrificing its life or its cards or anything. But the whole point of black is that it has access to more option and it's more self-sufficient than other colors. So in my eyes, black is defines well strong blind pickable champion that can be picked whatever the enemy composition and still kind of do their job. So what do you think about that?
So you're saying that by like you want to basically take the idea of like conditionality off black and essentially give it the opposite, because I think having like a coherent color pie doesn't necessarily have to, like, it doesn't have to match exactly to Magic. It just needs to be a decent way to evaluate the champions, right? Yeah,
I feel like a strong part of Magic's color pie is the concept of having two enemy colors and two allied colors that help define their roles. This is why black and white have to be sort of opposed. In Magic, it's rules against lawlessness. It can be something else in League of Legends, but it's still an opposition, which helps understand and frame the discussion.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't know why we're having polarity here. Like what I think of when I think of white champions is what you're defining as black. Whereas when I think of black, I think of like the trade, sort of like what Matt said when we were going over the definitions, right? Like the trade-offs, the conditions, the sacrifice. I think that's, I don't know why, but when I think of black, I don't think of self-sufficient. I always think of something that has to enable it. Like greatness at a cost, right? Like life lost in exchange for something, or counters in exchange for something. Not the actual counter. Or like actives that involve death or sacrifice or payment. So I don't. Yeah.
But it's not really specific to the opening. It's more specific to itself. Like black plays by itself. It plays with its own blood, whereas white is more about reacting to the opponent, like having specifically good cards against specific stuff. Lots of white cards in older formats are used as sideboard cards more than generally good cards. If you go to Legacy outside of Swords to Plowshare, pretty much there's no white that's being played. There's lots of white in sideboards because the white is all about answering.
I think talking about Legacy is pretty, like, not useful, right?
Okay.
Because like what the color pie was 25 years ago.
Oh,
well, Legacy is only like modern cards plus Force of Will now anyway. So.
What?
Yeah, but you're talking about Swords to Plowshares. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
Swords is really
is the exception. Swords to Plowshare is not true white cards. Other white cards are more about answering and being specific counters. I feel like that was what Polo was saying as well, about white cards being very strong, but at only one thing.
Yeah. And I think that like whenever standard cards come out, right, in any given format, I feel like and tell me if you disagree. Regardless of how white develops in Legacy or Modern or Vintage over time, I think that I think it actually gives credence to the fact that white generally is a binary answer to, you know, things in very specific situations. Jack of all trades. It's versatile in standard formats or in like recent events. And how it develops in older formats deviates, I think, from, or maybe not deviates, but takes on more extremity. Or it becomes more extreme the longer that you go back. Whereas black out the gate, or like red out the gate, blue out the gate, green out the gate, no matter what, when they come out the gate, they're always sort of having pretty defining characteristics, and then they get molded over time.
One part of the white definition that I like is that I think it makes sense to have like the white cards, and I think this applies both to Tolkien's definition and sort of the one that we came to, is that the white cards are hammers that do a very specific job, and they do it very well. Like they in the binary aspect, right? That's what you're saying, Tolkien, right? Is that
Yes. For me, like the archetypal almost mono white champion is Veigar. If you've seen the 5 other champions in the game, they're all points where Veigar will be the best champion. It will completely counter whatever they're trying to achieve. They will have no answer to it, and you will destroy them. To me, that's mono white. Like you've seen their deck, you have the card that destroyed them, and well, you know, it's your counter, it's your hate card.
Why does T1 never pick Veigar?
It is picked as a 5th pick on red side, and that's the only time it's picked. And my team last year, Splice, was the only team picking it.
No, Fnatic.
Fnatic did pick it a little bit, but not at Worlds, I think. They picked it once at Worlds. Like.
Yeah, against Faker.
That's true.
the solo kill.
There was some Veigar.
There was some Veigar. I mean, Veigar to me is blue and white. I don't.
Yeah, I agree, blue and white. I think for the reasons that you're saying, like it is white, but if it's really difficult, right, to define champions by single colors. Like some champions can be, right, but
Veigar's denial of a team, because I agree with you. He does settle the wreckage, or he does Wrath of God, or he does Sword of Plowshare most team compositions that try to come into him. He does flash, and you know, not literally like League of Legends flash. He does just Event Horizon stops all aggression. And obviously he has a lot of surface area with his W and his Q that he can account for. He can nuke people and whatnot. But I think the fact that Veigar, once he gets strong enough, once his late game's online and he's just walking and basically says, I'm going to QR you and you're fucking dead, that's like a blue-white endgame. That's like a Teferi ult or something that has eventually it comes online. But he builds up to that, and he stalls you, and he locks you, and he restricts you. He terraforms the team fight because of Event Horizon. Like, there's limited surface area. Which, to me, in my mind, is also sort of like some blue cards, because he's controlling
it's like Dominaria Teferi. It does everything by itself. It locks up the end game.
Yeah,
gives you
yeah.
a kill condition,
He is
and it
Teferi.
interacts.
Yeah, he's Teferi.
Dominaria Teferi.
Yeah, yeah. Paulo, are you here?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. Okay.
It's tough to process everything because I feel like in Magic the colors aren't narrowly defined, right? So I think what you were saying is right, and what Toki's saying is right too, but it's just two different ways to look at white. Right? The way we look at blue is like, oh, blue is a color of the late game, but also blue is the color of tempo, right? And tempo is almost the opposite of late game. So the same. Sorry?
I really want to bounce on that. Sorry, I'll let you finish your point, but I really want to bounce on what you just said.
So you can look at blue and you think, okay, how do we classify it as late game? Which LoL champions are late game? But also blue is the tempo deck, so which LoL champions are tempo? And it's going to be two different kinds of champions. So you can choose whichever. There are many ways to classify blue in Magic, and there are many ways to classify white in Magic, and they're going to apply to different champions in the league.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's. I want to bounce on red and blue, and indeed, you did define red and blue as, how to say, scaling versus early game.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if you want to talk about League of Legends champions in Magic terms, these should be more relegated to an understanding akin to curve or mana cost, whereas colors are still something else. In my eyes, red is more about unreliability. Like red can do very strong things. Red can have a late game, but red is unreliable. Red is not guaranteed to have success in the late game, even with its late game cards. In my eyes, a very red champion is Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank doesn't scale poorly because it only has to land one hook, and it can completely turn the tide late game. But it's not a good late game champion by itself. It doesn't scale by auto-attacking or just staying there. It scales unreliably. It needs to hit this hook to scale. And on the other side, blue is about having more options and having more ways to approach how you're going to win the game. It ties into scaling, and it's champions like Azir, who have both a strong landing phase, push, and teamfight potential, but that paid with like weaker power spikes or, you know, a more flat power curve. So I feel like if you remove scaling from the colors and give it back with thinking about scaling like a mana curve when you're deck building, because as you've said, building your team composition is closer to deck building a Magic deck than drafting Magic.
Yes.
And about how you approach the mana curve in your deck, it's not related to the colors. You can have a big red deck, like you can have a low to the ground blue deck. It's I feel like it's two different things. And yeah, that's my vision on how you can use Magic's concept to conceptualize League of Legends.
Okay. I think like touching on the scaling and the mana curves and whatnot. I feel like most and feel free to correct me if you think I'm wrong. Most champions that we would identify as blue, they don't fall off early, or they don't fall off even in mid game. They can keep going the distance, which by its nature is sort of also referring to monocursts in a way, or like Blitzcrank. I agree with you. I mean, that's why we wrote volatile. Like volatile, straightforward. Narrow down the areas of interaction in the game. This is what Paulo said. You're hoping to either win the game before the opponent has a chance. Blitzcrank's interesting in that Blitzcrank is sort of it can be that volatile last ditch effort to win a game or to break something open. Which again, now we're getting into nitty gritty like specifics of red or specifics of blue, which Paulo talked about, because there's lots of different variations of these colors like throughout the 25 years of Magic. And I think it's I think it's absurd to try to say that you can cover every single angle, especially because Wizards is starting to do more and more stuff with the colors by like allowing black to do different things or allowing green to do different things in recent years. Than they historically allowed. But I think like giving a generalized synopsis makes it easier to identify or capture the essence of strategic philosophies.
Yeah, the way I say it, I agree with you, like philosophically speaking.
Yeah.
But I think it's just more useful if we take a red to be, you know, the early game team has to get ahead. Like in practicality, it's a much more useful to think about than what philosophically it's defined as, because that doesn't have as much of a practical application.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like if you want to define, then if you want to apply the color pie to Magic from a draft perspective, then you have to use the colors, as opposed. You could just say, otherwise you're just talking the same language as before. You're just saying this is an early game champ, this is a late game champ. If you just want to apply it to curve.
I'll have a question then. Are we able
and you can define
to
champions by
identify...
that. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
So then the question is, are we able to identify strong early game and strong late game champions? We're able to make heuristics about them. But I feel like it's still something that's generally misunderstood in League of Legends. Scaling in general can be easily seen with long range champion, but a range advantage is not the only way you can scale. And so I feel like scaling in itself is something that's very hard to define, which makes it then hard to define if a champion is blue or red. If we only define it as scaling and not as other traits that would define how the champion operates in game.
Well, I think the term scaling, we addressed this at the very beginning of the stream, right? Scaling is relative to the opponent. Or it's relative to like what you're going up against. Draven is going to scale harder than Lucian in most cases, because they come from the same school of thought. Draven hits harder. You could argue that Lucian has more flexibility, or like Foulkes Falco analogy or something like that. But generally, what you're picking them for, Draven is coming in harder and faster at what they're trying to achieve. And if you then want Lucian for some of his upside in some areas at the cost of sacrificing some power or damage or something, it still, I don't think, defeats the point that does remain, that a 6-item Draven is going to achieve a lot more than a 6-item Lucian. In terms of just raw beatdown, raw stats, and whatnot. I also don't think that a red champion can't scale all the way up to 6 items, because there's obviously examples of ones that can. Or I don't think that red inherently means non-scaling. I think it's always going to be relative, but generally red won't scale. Which, again, this all comes back to I can't speak. Generalness, I'm not even going to try the other word. A general frame of mind to trying to approach the draft. Because right now, League of Legends gets so complex that it's difficult to talk about just the champions in isolation, but by allocating colors towards them, it might help people see things that they weren't seeing before, and it might help make it easier. Sort of like a stepping stone, or like training wheels. Like, these champions are clearly trying to do these things inside of the color pie. They are clearly harmonious with other ones that are trying to do this, or whatnot. There's clearly off-theme things, sort of like the Tahm Kench that we went over, like the DRX, or not DRX, the Fnatic G2. There were 2 champions that clearly were just out of left fucking field. They had no business being in that draft. Makes no sense. And unless they're so overpowered that you're willing to splash them, if we just labeled those champions with colors, they would stick out like a sore thumb.
But this implies that champions of the same color would go well together. But ideally in Magic, if you had no mana problems, you would play 5 colors. And it has happened a lot of times in the past when mana allowed it. Like, ideally in Magic, you want to play 5 colors.
I mean, if you had no mana problems, you could play every card. You would play... Yeah, but if you're defining the colors by like speed and style, then you would also play colors that do the same speed and style of thing, right? In general.
Yeah, but then it comes down more to the cards themselves than the colors. Because if we use
that's just trying to take the complexity ad infinitum, which is just like A, needless, and B, like really just like that's not how it works.
So you're trying to define colors as group of champions that do well together. But for example, white, or the color that has the strong counterpicks, is not really defined in relation to other champions in the same type. Different champions that are strong counters to specific playstyles might not fit well together, despite being defined by the same color then.
I think this touches on what we said earlier, where blue and red tend to, at least in terms of League of Legends, blue and red tend to be the overarching themes of a lot of the champions, with white, green, and black being very supportive. I would say black less so. Like, if I could allocate like numbers to these colors, right, I would say like red's 5, blue's 5, white and green are like 3.5, and then black is like 2 in terms of like frequency to appear. Or like in terms of, and again, it just comes back to like Riot's design of champions, the way that kits work, the way the passives work, and whatnot. Does that make sense?
I feel like we're taking steps backwards. Is anyone with me on this?
Okay. Paulo, what is your take on all this?
Like, take it away, Paulo.
Well, I think the more useful way of framing it is in terms of like usually the red being red means that you have to get ahead early and that you're not going to win the late game, and being blue means you're going to win the late game, so you don't have to get ahead early, because that's the most actionable thing, right? That's the most important thing to know, and it is kind of simplistic because it is kind of tautological, right? Oh, you know, obviously the scaling champions are the ones that scale, so they're blue, which are the scaling champions. So if you already know they're the scaling champions, you don't need to call them blue because you already know it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you see so many things in the games that make it seems like people don't actually understand it very deeply. Like either they don't know they're the blue team, right? Or they just go and pick a red champion in a team that is supposed to be blue, and then that's very weird. So I think it is useful to just put it in simple terms of, oh, this is red, this is blue, even though it's not necessarily, philosophically speaking, the absolute truth. Like, you could be playing a blue-red deck, right? But in terms of, this is an analogy to help us understand League of Legends, I think being simpler will get you to the point that you want to get to.
Yeah, that's what...
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what my goal of this ultimately is to attach training wheels or to simplify traits of champions. And whether or not they all like, if all five champions are not necessarily going to be the same color, right? Because I talked about with Matthew at the very beginning of the stream, if both of you guys were listening, generally champions in LoL are like 2 to 3 colors. And the reason that I want to say 2 to 3 colors is because I want people to be aware they have these options available. And the reason that I want to say that is because how many people are aware that Gragas is a white champion? Not many people. Or they might not, like, how many pro players are actually aware we can pick Gragas early because he can do many different things. And we can utilize that to our advantage. And I'm going to say not many players know. Because the mic checks, too many pro players that I've had on my stream, no one realizes this. So it's a lie if we say otherwise. So if there is a way to guide people into realizing that Gragas is white, that's a stepping stone that they can use. If we can thoroughly or clearly explain that this champion clearly fulfills this role, and that you can analyze it as such, view it as such, etc., that helps these people connect the dots where they're clearly not doing it on their own, or clearly like relying on hearsay from teammates, or preconceived biases, or preconceived beliefs. I think that's really, really helpful. And that's like what I wanted the goal of this stuff to be.
The end goal is to put champions in 2 to 3 colors groups.
Yes.
Such as that champions that fit in the same 3 colors group at a maximum go well together, for example. Is that the goal?
Well, champions that have overlap, right?
Champions that have overlap, or champions that have clearly defined things. Like Draven... Yeah, but by generalized.
But if you put 3 colors, champions will all have an overlap.
Yeah, but there could be gross. Well, not all champions are 3, right? So I said 2, 2, 3. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the point is more just like, hey, Fnatic was drafting a blue deck. They wanted to go late. They wanted to scale, and they didn't. The strength of a blue deck is that it doesn't care how it does that early in the game, unless it's incredibly far behind, then it's still going to do well. And then they picked a red champion, which is Lee Sin, which is a very much red champion. It's not a little red, it's very red, that really has to do things early, or it doesn't do anything later on. And that doesn't match the general blue composition. Now, there might be some red champions that would match some blue compositions in general, like if we, depending on how we classify things. But just the point of, like, you have a mono blue comp, don't throw a random red tutu in it, right?
Right. No, I think that's what I'm also trying to say. I also don't want to say that. Okay, so let's say Ezreal is blue, white, red. What I wanted to do, like on the Google chart, is basically outline Ezreal is very blue, very red, and a little bit of white. Like, in terms of, like, generally how he slots in, right? So we can do that. We can establish that, right? That way, at the end of a draft, you might see champions, like what Paulo is saying, very, very blue, very, very blue, very, very blue, and then all of a sudden you get this deeply red champion that is not harmonious with other champs. You know what I mean? Like, I want to try to make it so that something sticks out like a sore thumb. And I like all the draft talks I've had on stream, like the TSM Draft Dystopia stream where I talked about things. There were so many things. I mean, I'll pull up the TSM draft on stream really quick. Okay, so where's the Victor? I don't know where it came in. Okay, I think this was it. Why is Victor with these four. Like, I made the joke in the video that, you know, if Victor was a machine, he would unplug himself because he wants to jump off a cliff. Are you guys there?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
I
okay,
am.
okay.
And
I
this-
am. I don't know the answer to your question.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I think, like, if there were color palettes that were available,
Nick, have
it's-
you liked your own video on YouTube?
huh?
Have you liked your own video on YouTube?
I don't upload my own stuff to YouTube all the time. What? Max does it.
But PV, to give you an example here, it's like red side has a mono red Lotus Ground burn deck with a 5-drop. Like their last pick is a 5-drop that they're never gonna cast. They're never gonna get there.
Yes, yeah, basically.
But I feel like in the end we end a lot of the discussion saying, oh, this team is mono red, and if it's mono red, you should put more red if you want it to work, and nothing else. But I don't feel like it generalizes that well to other colors.
Oh, well, I mean, Atrox has conditions, right? Atrox wants... Atrox is sort of like black-red, right? In the sense that he wants melee champions to interact with. Atrox wants to get ahead. I mean, I would hope that we could agree that in even settings, if those conditions aren't there, like if he doesn't have melee champions to interact with, if he doesn't get ahead, if he doesn't have a reliable way to interact in mid-game, he's going to suffer. And so if in the draft, you can acknowledge that, hey, the opponent don't have these pieces, I just picked Atrox, my draft is even more screwed. Because there's a condition that our team composition now either has to pivot towards in order to accommodate Atrox, or we're just screwed.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I just want to make your points even clearer with data. I looked at it recently, and Atrox has a sub 30% win rate when he's not ahead at 15 minutes in professional games. So yeah, he sucks when he's not ahead. Like it's not even close.
Yeah.
Wait, is that I don't know, but do not most champs have like a really bad win rate when they're not ahead?
No.
Oh,
I cannot do like it's literally my job.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. That's your job. But is that lower than normal to be at 30%?
So you can look at it. Personally, I look a lot at goal difference at 15 for champions in the wins and in their losses, try and see the difference and their average and the standard deviation as well, you know. And there are champions that are very fine and have very good win rates when they're even. And I even don't really look at the win rate because win rate assume teams are evenly matched, which literally never happens in pro play. Like the win rates metric is only relevant if the champions are the thing that has the biggest weight on the game result. So you still need to add another step. But no, there are champions that perform really well. So I'm not talking about literally the win rate metric, but metrics very similar to win rate when they are behind at 15 minutes. And those are champions that usually you define as K.
Okay.
The only thing that I would like the Atrox are like not data points in general, right? Because we actually talked about data at the very beginning of the stream. Like data can lead us to questions. I don't think that they can explicitly answer everything for a lot of reasons, right? Because of who's piloting it. Because for instance, if we have only the top 4 teams or something in LCK play the bottom 4 teams of NALCS and every single one of them picks Atrox, or all the winning teams pick Atrox, then his win rate's inflated. So it doesn't give you a clear answer. If Atrox in the games where he's winning have the things that he's very good against present in the game, and then in the games where he's losing, the things that he's very bad against are present and thus causing him to lose, that has to be assessed. But the stat, Atrox's win rate, in a vacuum doesn't mean anything.
Yes, I agree. And that's what I said when I said win rate assume evenly matched teams. By definition, if you look at a win rate, it assumes that the champions were the defining factor in the game's result, which I agree is wrong, because in professional play, by definition, teams are unbalanced. Like there is no matchmaking in pro.
Yes.
So yeah, I agree. Win rate by itself is a bias metric, and the number I gave you is not literally win rate. It's taking into account the team's skill discrepancy.
Okay.
And in this situation, Aatrox is below 30%.
Okay.
When bad teams are losing against good teams, or good teams are winning against bad teams, I don't really look at the information.
Yeah, and then this means that Aatrox is a red champion.
Yes.
And you should try to put Aatrox in a draft that supports red champions, which doesn't necessarily mean like that they have to all be red. It just means that the red champion has to make sense in that draft.
Yes.
Right?
So the context matters surrounding him.
Yeah.
But people
Yeah,
need to be
I'll
aware
be
of that. Because why is Aatrox right now picked on B1 and R1, R2? Why is such an erroneous error being made by all pro teams around the world?
No pro team I was on did that.
Okay, well, I'm just saying. What I'm saying is that there's a problem in drafting globally, right? And there's no one talking about that. So right now in our stream, we're delving more into draft right now, even though we're not even technically talking about League entirely. We're mostly using Magic right now. Than I believe any like publicly available content on draft, because no one can talk about it. And the reason that no one can talk about it in terms of draft is some of the topics that we touched on earlier. Pro players don't understand it themselves. Pro players don't have enough information on each other's roles in order to deck build, together, like to understand like breakpoints at different parts of the games. And so there's a lot of things that are problematic. So you get people that think that Aatrox is pickable early when he's not. You have people that think that because Aatrox can go even in a lot of lanes, that he's an acceptable champion to pick early when he's not. You have a lot of very flawed, not you, but people in general, have a lot of very flawed views on the game. And because of either recency bias or because of maybe team and discrepancy, they win with it sometimes and it makes it okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I completely agree with that.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll be off to sleep because it's already pretty late.
Okay.
Do you have any last questions about data or drafting, or am I just living like that? As you wish. Yeah, the reason why I wanted to
get fake a signature.
Not really.
Fuck. Oh, well, there you go.
But yeah, the reason why I wanted to come on the call was a discussion about coaching and data in LoL. I think there's a lot to say about it, but it's not really the theme of the call, so we can do that another day.
Yeah, that would be fine. We could do something.
There's a lot to be said on the subject.
There's a lot of problems because a lot of I remember talking about this with Max, that data is really useful to people that know how to actually apply it, but most coaches don't. So it's only useful to players. But then if players don't know how to apply it because of the topics that we just talked about, then it ends up becoming problematic.
Yeah, personally, I do the analysis and I present the answers and the conclusions to the players and the coaches. They don't have to do the analysis themselves. Like, my whole job is to look at the wealth of data that is available about League of Legends and to make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have one question before you leave. We're kind of talking about this. Who makes in your team, who makes the final decision on picks? Like, do you go to your players and say, pick this, and they do it? Or do they say, no, I'm going to pick this, and then they pick it, and that's fine?
So currently, it's Coach Kim who has the last word, but he does inquire a lot with the players. They talk a lot during draft, and a lot also happens during draft. When I was at Spice last year, it was much, much more structured. And once we were on stage, everybody knew exactly which champions were going to get picked and when. So it was still the coach who had the last word. But there could literally have been no coach last year, and we would have made the same drafts.
With one question is how much are the drafts mapped out? Like,
at
like
Spice,
do you have a written decision tree of like pretty much how, like, say if you're first pick, then it's a lot easier to plan your draft, right?
Yes. With Duke, Mac, and Peter Dunn, we had decision trees and everything mapped out to the last detail. Like, you could be in the crowd watching the draft and knowing every single pick from your side and from the opponent if you watch a Spice draft.
Mm-hmm.
At T1, well, I'm part of the team, but I also don't speak Korean. So I'm not literally part of the drafting preparation. I give them reports, which are translated to Korean, and I interact with them, but I'm not literally in the room doing draft preparation. So I'm not entirely sure, but from what I've seen and from how they work with me, it feels like Coach Kim has a lot of power, and he is also enabling players. Like he asks them before what they want to play. Of course, he makes sure they're ready, and he will have the last word. But he is very, he listens to the players in a good way.
Oh, okay.
That goes back to the facilitation conversations, though, where a lot of input is facilitated amongst players, and then one person can have an end conclusion, but it's being reached by a feed of input. Am I saying anything wrong here? Like there's obviously like there's examples of mic checks where this is. I mean, they're all out there on YouTube. I'm not talking about T1 in particular. I mean, there are like the T1 backstage videos where, this is like last year, right, when content was being made. There was lots of times where there was clearly lapses in knowledge between players, and there's subtitles and stuff, and fakers explaining something about a dynamic or something. So there's clearly those lapses that are not present, or there's lots of questions being asked, like lots and lots of questions. And obviously every single team is going to be a little bit different. But I think that goes into like what's happening when it comes into drafts and when it comes into prep. Because like there's I don't know how many pro players right now in the Twitch chat that they've spoken about it. I've invited them on stream in the last couple of weeks or months or whatnot that are very open about saying like, yeah, my jungler or my top laner doesn't know about these matchups, and we can't reach these conclusions. So a lot of things is players telling the coach like what they're gonna pick or what they're gonna draft, and then the coach tries to like sculpt things based on things that they've seen elsewhere, as well as just facilitate and enable the conversation amongst the players when on stage or in preparation to going on stage.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point of view for a lot of teams. Personally, I was very lucky to work with teams that had a very driven vision of coaching. That's why they wanted a data analyst, precisely. But it's definitely true there are lots of other teams that don't have this approach and that are much more freeform, let's say, when it comes to drafting.
Yeah.
So I'll be leaving you guys. If you're curious, by the way, LS, I wrote a full article about my vision of League of Legends coaching, and I also talk about picks and so you can give it a look someday.
Okay.
Have a good night, and see you. It was great.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. All right.
To business.
To business. All right. So, Paulo, where do you have anything else you want to ask about before we jump into like champion talk?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
One thing that I was thinking about while he was talking about the draft and whatnot, is at the same time, obviously these people are all professionals, right? So it feels weird that I, a silver player, would come and say, "Hey, this champion doesn't make any sense," right? I don't have the background to give advice on that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you see certain things in the draft, right, where it will be a blue draft, and then they pick a champion, and then the blue draft will immediately pick a champion, and then they'll think for the full time and pick their second champion.
Yes.
And then what you're doing there is just giving more information to the other team. Like the other team has more time to react to your first pick because they know it sooner. And it feels so obvious to me that this is just the incorrect way of doing it, just from a logical standpoint. And then everyone does it. And I remember once I saw Cloud9 do that, and they did the opposite. They just waited as long as possible, and then they picked their two champions at the exact same time, giving the lowest amount of time for the other team to react. And I was like, oh, finally a team that does that.
Yes. Speed drafting.
So at the same time...
Yeah, like if you know your pick beforehand, then you just snap lock, right?
Yes.
And then your opponent to decide. They can't think on your clock.
Yes.
Well, or you wait as long as possible to lock the first one so that they don't have time between the first and the second.
Yes. That is what people should do. Yes.
This is such a simple thing. and the best teams aren't doing it. So maybe they are actually just picking Lissim and is just wrong, right? I don't know.
Yes. Everyone in chat saying scripted.
Yeah, so guys, what you want to do here is you wait until it's 0.01 seconds left in your draft, lock in, you miss the lock in, you actually
And then you blame it on lag. You blame it on the Riot client.
yeah, that's
What, but is this something that you talk about usually? I've never seen you talk about that.
No,
in the
yes.
LCK.
Well, not in the LCK.
Okay.
So I do lots of, so I coach stream LCS and LEC, and then I cast LCK. But I've also been a coach. I've coached teams in the past, but I also do like freelance coaching for high level players, like in LEC and LCS and whatnot. And sometimes I do casual coaching with like high level players on stream and whatnot. And I get into like a lot of these talks, and I have like documentation of it going back like 6 years. So over time, I've developed like a polarizer or controversial personality in the scene, because there's only so much patience I have with like some stuff that is very frustrating. You know what I mean? Like why is it taking so long to fix something like this? And then this swings into another thing that I'm going to be making a video or talking about with someone in a video soon on the topic of spectacle, and not the magic mechanic, but the thing that in the League of Legends community, no one seems to pay attention unless there's spectacle, unless there's something that really just garners attention. And if you do it in a way that doesn't apparently ruffle enough feathers, nothing happens. It just falls on deaf ears. And I would imagine that maybe this is like this in the I don't know. I don't know the Magic community enough. Has there ever been something that was actually just very meta shifting or like game breaking in terms of thought processes that someone just didn't shut up about and it eventually became mainstream? I don't know how the Magic community is.
I'm trying to think of like big holes in massive amounts of people's games.
Comes to mind, but I'm sure there is like there's probably a card that someone championed forever and then eventually everyone adopted. But
I think like let's talk. Wasn't Kibler known for? I don't know how much you know. Yeah, okay. Chat's actually.
No, I got one. I get Gitaxian Probe. Gitaxian Probe is a card that existed, and its text is basically. Do you know what Gitaxian Probe does?
Yeah, I know. I go to tax it. Yeah.
Okay. It is basically it costs Phyrexian blue mana, which means you can. It
pay 2
basically
life.
Doesn't cost any mana.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost any mana, and you can look at your opponent's hand and you draw a card.
Yes.
Which means it's essentially zero cost information, and it wasn't played. It was played widely and has been since banned in essentially every format. But that's a card that pretty much, outside of a few exceptions, should probably be in almost every single deck, because that level of absurd, like people, there was like blue-white control decks that could pay the mana cost and didn't even have to pay the Phyrexian life. That wouldn't play a card that gives you full information of your opponent's hand. Like, and that I think that for me, at least that's the one that I champion regularly. That's a card that was just never really it was played a ton, but that card is just beyond broken. Like, fundamentally breaks the rules of Magic.
Yeah. All right. So that sounds like maybe like what I'm referring to here. Like, so Paulo, imagine there was some pro player that wouldn't shut up about Gitaxian Probe, but he's really polite about it, and he tells everyone, and they just sort of like laugh and they don't listen, and then he just gets fed up. You know what I mean? And he starts making angry videos, or he starts like making videos that not like attack, but critique spots and gameplays, or like decks that highlight the power of Gitaxian Probe. And in doing so, captures the attention of many people because it's ruffling feathers. You know what I mean? And then eventually Gitaxian Probe gets credence. Would that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Okay. So that's been a pretty popular song and a dance for me.
So Gitaxian Probe is Leandris?
There you go. That see? You already know.
That you do talk about in the LCK.
Yes. Okay, but that's an example, right? So you know about this one. So in the LCK, almost no one builds Leandries. But in LEC and LCS, which conveniently enough is an English-speaking audience, right? So I have my Twitter, I have YouTube, there's Reddit. Koreans don't use social media the way that Western players use it and the way that Western analysts and coaches. There's no EDU content on Korea because EDU content is sort of frowned upon by players that are trying to go pro. So basically the people that would be good enough to go pro or do something worthwhile in League, if they're making EDU content, it's frowned upon. Or it can actually work against them. And so the only social media source that Koreans use is Facebook, which is an echo chamber. And there's no anonymity. So if you go out and, like, for instance, sometimes I actually jokingly message Foulkes, why did Faker complete Morello here? Or, like, why is this still being built? Or why is no one going Leandries? Or, like, things like this. There's no way to reach the Korean audience, which I am pretty damn sure that, like, why does everyone take Scorch when their whole team composition is trying to scale? You know what I mean? Scorch is a rune in League that is typically for lane kingdoming, but they'll take it.
It's a red rune.
Yes, and they'll take it in a lane that isn't to be played out in red manner, and their team comp isn't red. So Gathering Storm would just make more sense. There's so many of these damn things in LCK, and I'm filtering myself right now, so you can imagine what I'm like when I'm not in a call like this. But it just drives me nuts. But there's no way to reach the LCK. So Leandries is just non-existent. It's just not there. Like, that's just the thing. Every fucking set builds Black Cleaver. And you can actually explain it in a way that they can't really disagree with. I mean, it would take some mental gymnastics to disagree with it, right? They might say, oh, I can complete it sooner. But then you say to them, why do you need to complete it sooner? Can you not really just wait the 1 or 2 minutes? Because oftentimes they're completing it in a lull state. So of course they can wait, to complete it. Like, and obviously when there's times where they can't wait, I will obviously say, like, okay, the Morello is the good buy here, or Black Cleaver is okay here, or something. But this is very common. And then, you, I, and Matt are sitting here having this conversation, and like you're saying, why can I, as a silver player, point out these errors that top pro teams are doing? And then the question becomes, well, what are the staffs doing? Hence my frustration.
I see.
Yes.
How many Twitch Prime subs would you say that you've made as a Leandries seller, though?
Oh,
That's
too many.
You have certainly farmed off a Leandries.
Too many right now. Too many. I have no idea how many Twitch. I have no idea how many people.
Speaking of, I haven't actually seen anyone, not even one person, subscribing with Twitch Prime in this stream, and I'm just here to say, guys, that's unacceptable. We need some Twitch Prime.
I had a stat once. So I have no idea what the ratio is right now. But like 70% of my or like 60% of my subs, I think, was the ratio. I think I had like 6K and like 3,700 or something. Or like 3,400. I don't know. Some obscene number was actually Twitch Primes.
Is that more than normal?
Well, now I'm higher than that. But I think it's actually balanced out in recent times. But there was definitely a point where I was a Twitch Prime bank.
You're just farming Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
Nice.
Exactly. Okay.
So, do we want to start assigning some colors?
Yeah, let's get to some.
Do we want to go for another 4-hour color assigning marathon?
You know what?
Or are we gonna 2-part this thing?
Listen, Matt, I really enjoy these conversations. I don't get to have these conversations with people.
Oh, Nick, I'm always available, mate.
Thank you. And Apollo, I don't know how you feel. I know.
Have a pride?
Damn. I mean, other than being a Magic player, I've been a Magic writer for over 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And most of what I write about is just general strategy. So I really like thinking and talking about it in like general terms.
Yeah. This is like I love doing this, and I wish more people enjoyed it. But it seems like people don't enjoy it, or there's the unfortunate trade-off. The people that might enjoy it aren't the ones that like Like, you wouldn't want to talk about a 0 tier deck with someone that doesn't understand why the deck is 0 tier. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because
Yes.
you can't. You know, you're literally talking past each other for like a lot of the things that you're saying, and sometimes that's not totally fun. But yeah. Charge guys, thank you for 5,000 bits. We have a shitload of viewers, by the way, for just sitting here talking about Magic.
Are the numbers normal? I have no idea.
Yeah,
what
we're
your
at
no- what your
8K.
normal is.
We're
Oh wow.
yeah.
I look at stream occasionally, but it was really distracting for me to read stream, and also try and listen to the absolute five heads
We're
without just being like fully lost.
no, yeah. There's 8K people here for
Oh,
talking.
is that more than your normal?
For co-stream, so the most recent co-streams sort of blew up.
Yeah, those were crazy.
Those were unholy. I had 30 and 40K. Those were unholy. But normally the draft talks don't get this much. So I think that's because you're here
Sweet.
and then Paulo's here as well. So I'm sure that we're mixing some communities
Awesome.
right now. So, I mean, obviously I'm really grateful to have you both here. What a pleasant surprise it was for Paulo to show up and chat.
There you go. Yeah, you've already PayPal'd me, so we're all good.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's fun. I'm being introduced to all sorts of Twitch chat things that I didn't know, like Five Head or Pog.
By the way,
or all these
doesn't
things
know.
that aren't part of my life.
I saw that you made a tweet that said that you were trying to do MTG coaching.
Yes, I do it.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, I know a lot of my community or like fan base or whatever, they like Magic, and also they like EDU. Like I'm an EDU, I'm an EDU person. So I've had lots of people message me for MTG coaching that normally I just say to message Valentine, because Valentine was doing it. But I can obviously, like, I have no problem, you know, trying to. I don't know how much you coach or if that's like something that you like, but you know, I'm just obviously trying to bring awareness to it for Twitch chat right now, because lots of people they
That would be
buy.
great.
Yeah. That yeah. Yeah. Okay.
He's saying, give yourself the self plug, Paolo. Tell people why.
Yeah. Tell your
you
tell.
are-
Yeah.
Sell
Well,
yourself right here.
Well, that's awkward, but yeah. So for those who don't know, I'm Paolo. I've been playing for many years professionally. I'm the current world champion. I'm in the Hall of Fame. I've earned the most money of anyone playing Magic, and I do coaching from time to time. We can talk about specific decks if you want, or just general strategy, whichever one you want. And then you can just find me on Twitter. Just DM me. I'm PVDDR, which are my initials. So yeah, thanks for the plug-in.
Yeah. I'm gonna link your Twitter on chat.
No one asked me to, but I'm going to do it myself. Okay. I'm not the current world champion. Not that good at Magic, especially compared to Paolo. Although I do come in with a few good memes, and I'd love to farm some clout on Twitter. So do go to twitter.com/Matthew Foulkes. There you go. You've been efficiently farmed, ladies and gentlemen.
Matthew, bad at everything, folks.
Confirmed.
Oh my god. Do you know Valentine, by the way, Paulo?
Yeah, I do.
Are you guys
I do.
friends or are just acquainted?
We're just acquainted. We've seen each other in tournaments, but we haven't had like deep conversations.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I just linked your Twitter and whatnot. I'll make a post in like my community Discord too, which is usually focused around EDU, because people ask for like MTG coaching, like all the time, or like where to get it, and I never have like a good source because I haven't played in years and whatever. So now I have someone to funnel them to.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You
That
better-
wasn't what I was trying to get when I came here, but it's a good surprise.
No, dude.
Wait.
You should be
TV has a
making
blue tick on
content.
Twitter as well.
I would I feel like Magic content when I was trying to grind it, and when I played my qualifier and I won it or whatever, like I was so reliant on Valentine Mackel and then Patrick Dickman by proxy of Valentine, like here in Korea. So like content, it didn't feel like it was available or like digestible. And you're the world champion, you're articulate, you can explain things. Like, I mean, you probably do already stream, Obviously, I assume.
I don't actually.
What is wrong with you?
You did no, you did stream, right though.
Well,
You
I
gotta-
did
you gotta
last year because
stream?
We had a
Patron?
contract to stream. Well, I write. I write every week.
No, make
That's
videos.
I like writing more though.
That's some real boomer logic right here.
Oh my god. Okay.
I like
Chat says-
reading
chat
more
says
than
Paolo-
watching.
So you could
Paolo
monetize
OnlyFans when?
your writing though.
Oh,
You know what
I
I
do. I mean,
Oh, you
I
do?
write for a website that sells cards and
Star City Games, right?
yeah, Star City Games.
They trying to.
I write every week for them.
You trying to? You looking for any Black Lotuses? Shit.
So what is this minus 600 thing?
Channel
People
points.
keep writing.
Yeah. So basically, Twitch made a new feature that people that watch your channel accrue this thing called channel points. And normally, the creator or the streamer can do things with the channel points in order to allow them to earn rewards. But because I'm lazy, I don't do anything, and 600 is the base to highlight a message. So they're just
Okay.
wasting their points.
I see.
Perfect.
They're not banking their points for when the day comes.
Yeah,
You can get OnlyFans for 6 million channel points.
exactly.
Yeah, which is-
Perfect. Perfect.
I see. Okay. See,
Okay.
I don't stream. I didn't even know about that.
Paolo, are you a sub hip?
I'm not a sub anywhere.
Ah.
Well, I'll
Can
wait to put me
someone-
in this
Can someone gift Paolo a sub, please? We need some more Twitch Primes. I'm just out here farming.
Matthew,
Nick, I
honestly,
realize-
you might not make it as a magic grinder or in poker, but you're a damn good farmer.
Nick, I've actually got. I'm five subs deep into my sub streak with you. They are all gifts.
I love it. I love it so
Full
much.
time scammer. Full time scammer.
Okay. All right. Let's jump into some champions. So let's do. So this is really long, by the way. So like I said, I wanted to break it into 2 blocks. So let's do like, how many champions do you guys want to do right now, and then end on? Because there's 148. There's no way.
Oh, how about we? No more than 48. Definitely no more than 48.
You want to do 48 so we have a nice even 50-50?
God, that was such a high number. Chat's looking for the dodge. How long? I guess. How long are we on? Like 5 hours? 4 hours? 3
We're
hours?
at we're at 3.5 right now. So
Okay.
I don't know how long it'll take on a champion. Like some of them that we've already done is like Shaco is red, blue, black. Now obviously he's Grixis. So like, yeah, Grixis, right? Me and Matthew did Shaco earlier. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Shaco. I know Shaco from TFT. I hate Shaco.
Oh,
It kills all my backline, but I haven't seen Shaco in any of the games that I watched for so long.
Yeah, so the thing about Shaco is he has to get ahead. He has to get ahead. He's aggressive. He is high risk, high reward. He's very volatile, right? But he has evasiveness, which is like his blue. He has like the deceive. He has the control-y aspects. He can grant living wards on the map because his boxes live for prolonged periods of time. So he can grant like utility in that regard. He can do mix-ups with his clone, which is his ultimate. He has like CC, he has deception, all that good stuff. But obviously, I think that me and Matt, when we talked about him, he has the black component in that if you're going to pick Shaco, you have to do a lot of things to make him work. And if they don't work, it's going to fall apart on top of yourself. And it's just going to feel really bad.
Okay, sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, great.
Are we going to start from the start?
Do you want to just go? You want to go alphabetical?
Well, I mean, we already fixed Aatrox, so it seems like a decent. They get a free one, you know.
Yeah, we do get a free one. And I'll come back. I'll come back and like say how deep they are into the certain colors probably later. Sort of like what I was talking about with Tolkien, that clearly like champions are more red or more blue. Like Atrox would probably be like black, red, red, red. You know what I mean? He would be like 3 reds and then a black, or like 3 reds, black, black. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.